Hey guys, it's Hank McGurk. Rarely do I ever speak about specific people. I don't like people to talk about me behind my back, but I suppose since this is the internet, everything is, nothing's behind anybody's back. There are three theories that are floating around. Many people are confused about our President Donald Trump and what happened with the whole set of missiles, the Tomahawks that were fired into Syria, the false flag Syrian sarin gas attack, and the situation with North Korea. So three theories, probably you've all heard them by now. The first, and I'll address all three and tell you exactly which one I think is going on. But the first is Trump was duped. And and the people that believe that Donald Trump was duped into the missile attack support that claim with the evidence that he's kind of in a cocoon, believing that the intelligence agencies have him in a cocoon and are able to manipulate what he sees, disinform him to a point where he will support strikes against different targets that are in their interest. Now, at first, I was very upset because I think, like anybody else, we all thought that Donald Trump was against interventions and against more actions in the Middle East, and to fire Tomahawk missiles into a sovereign nation with no formal declaration of war by the Congress of the United States is against the Constitution, and it breaks international law. So there's two major laws that were broken. And why also do they think he was duped? Because there are many people in his cabinet, and people will talk about Jared Kushner most specifically, and also say probably too that he's a Mossad agent, which may or may not be the case, surrounding himself with his family and people he can trust in that way, because when you're in a position like Donald Trump is in where you are kind of surrounded by the DC swamp, if you will, you would select people that you know and trust, and that would be part of your family, and perhaps that also his cabinet would be full of Zionists. They often say, if you look at the people that are there and have a track record, history in New York politics and Goldman Sachs and so on and so forth, as part of being bankers. So they would think, well, maybe he is in such a cocoon, he was duped into it, or Ivanka actually convinced her dad that she was just so upset about the children, and he did what any father would do, and so on and so forth. Well, for all that's worth, for my 2 cents worth, that all sounds like bull to me. So I kind of don't ascribe to the theory that Trump was duped. I've known Donald Trump around since back in the year 2000, when he was running as alongside Jesse Ventura as a libertarian candidate. And you can look at some of those things he said way back when to really give you a sense, before he was in the national spotlight, about what his political beliefs were. And like many people, I suppose, at that time, I thought it was more of a publicity stunt for him to improve the Donald Trump brand and for him to be able to profit by building his brand. And that's just one more way he gained exposure. But the things that Jesse Ventura said, and a lot of things that he said back in that day, I supported. I did like that candidate in 2000, and I liked Ron Paul too. But so that's neither here nor there. I don't think Donald Trump was duped. The second theory that's floating around right now is Trump, our President Donald Trump, President Trump. I should refer to him more respectfully. It's just a hard habit to break when you know him as Donald Trump from seeing him over years and years and years. But our President Donald Trump was co-opted. Maybe he had financial interests at stake. Maybe they'd come up with some blackmail on him. Maybe they made some threats with something that he couldn't turn down. Maybe they blew the devil's breath in his face, scolopines, something like that, and programmed him into a robot. And he had been co-opted into following the deep state agenda by a method of coercion. And I don't believe that that's the case either. I don't believe that he has flipped within 100 days, or we were duped all along. And this guy, Donald Trump, President Trump, he worked very, very, very hard to overcome overwhelming odds, fighting out there every day on the campaign trail. I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime a candidate work harder to win, or to see a man work harder to win. And Donald Trump is a man that has an ego, and he wants to win. So I do not believe, and if they had real dirt on him, we already know that the Obama administration and other, let's say, nefarious, extra-legal, international organizations had tapped his phones and were wiretapping him. The evidence is there. And if they had any dirt on him, they probably would have used it in a more direct way, because at that point, then you don't need him. And so what's the point of co-opting him? So I don't think he flipped. I don't think he got co-opted. I just don't think there's enough evidence there to support that. We'll see a little bit more as days go on. One possible reason the missile strike went into Syria, if he were co-opted, and this is what some people would say or claim, is that to test the S-300, S-400 anti-ballistic missile, or the ballistic missile systems the Russians have installed in Syria that will shoot down incoming Tomahawks, incoming fighter aircraft, stuff like that. There's very little that's known about those systems because the Russians simply won't activate them. It could have been a play to kind of trick or fool the Russians into start using some of their jamming technologies, start to activate those S-300, S-400 systems to learn how to counter them for inevitably a conflict between Russians and NATO forces. So there possibly could be a little bit of something to that, but given the fact that the Russians were warned ahead of time, we see that very little damage was done to the base itself. Only 27 out of 51 missiles even connected anywhere in that area. There are reports of some people having been killed, one Russian national having been killed. I'm not sure there's any evidence to really support that either. We don't really know what the facts are. So, seeing as planes were landing at that base, within a day or so, within hours of the attack, Tomahawk missiles can crater runways. They're pretty powerful missiles, so they're no joke. If they intended to hit targets, they can hit targets. They can hit targets a meter from a good distance out. American weaponry is very good. I mean, I still won't discount the fact, that American weaponry is really good. So I just don't believe that he was co-opted. When it comes to the whole North Korean thing, we saw that fizzle. I spoke out about that immediately, because at that point, just like everybody else, I had seen a crime committed in that first attack against a sovereign nation, and that very much concerned me. So I wasn't sure how the North Korea situation was going to develop. And there just simply wasn't enough information about that. And we're seeing the North Korea stuff start to fizzle already, and I hope it continues to do so. And now on to the third theory. And after really thinking about it for a long time, and typically I like to try and apply Occam's razor to it. So that's why initially I was so angry, because if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And that's usually one way you can cut through disinformation. But now the game is being played at such a level where disinformation is going back and forth all the time. It's very difficult to try and figure out what's true and what's not true. But after seeing the confusion that hit the mainstream media after the attack on Syria, and with Donald Trump's talk about, the way he supported it and whatnot, and all of a sudden he became the darling of all these news networks. And they're operating on a very short cycle. They're operating on a 24-hour news cycle. The left hand in the mainstream media oftentimes doesn't know what the right hand is doing, because of the fact that they're on all the time, they're visible all the time. They have to move quickly with stories. It doesn't really give them the same type of time that people like us have to really analyze a situation. So they have to go with the first thing, which is, I think, what we all felt. But after, really thinking about it quite a bit, it's okay. So we had Tomahawk missiles fired, didn't hit anything. We had Donald Trump all of a sudden become the darling of the mainstream media. That must have been very confusing for them. And you could see the confusion coming out here. So perhaps it was disinformation campaign, misinformation campaign. You also had that Moab that was dropped in Afghanistan. Okay, mother of all bombs. Well, what target did it hit? It hit old CIA tunnels that were made way back in the 80s when the United States was supporting the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in a fight against the Russians in Afghanistan. The CIA actually constructed those tunnels that they dropped the Moab on. And it's still very possible that nefarious drug-running CIA elements or extra-legal intelligence agency, I'm not going to put the whole CIA in the cooker for that one, because there's still good guys inside of every agency, good guys and bad guys inside of every agency. But, it's very possible they could have been running weapons to rebels and to ISIS elements, to drug-running elements out of those tunnels. And the Pentagon dropped that big bomb on them to send them a message. So to everybody else that's not really thinking about it or knows what the histories of those regions are, can look at it and say, wow, what was the point of that? Was that to send a message to North Korea? I think it was to send a message that the Pentagon is pretty serious about destroying ISIS and destroying the rebels that were created by the deep state in order to sow all that chaos across the Middle East. And they're failed, and very much a globalist bid. So I think President Trump is partitioned in a way. In any intelligence operation, things are on a need-to-know basis. And even the president himself might be in the position now where he's on a need-to-know basis. And he's playing a very important role, but he's not the be-all, end-all player in the game. Yes, he is an extremely important piece, but I believe he played a part, and he has to be partitioned to this. You can't have all the information in one area. To confuse the mainstream media, to confuse the deep state, to confuse different elements, and confuse us a little bit. And the American people turned on him pretty quickly. That's the nature of the mob. That's a very knee-jerk reaction. And perhaps I'm right, perhaps I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe he had been co-opted, or maybe he had been fooled. But I don't believe that to be the case. I just believe that right now we're kind of looking at a little smoke and mirror operation. But I don't know for sure. It's simply idle speculation from an armchair quarterback who just does a little bit of reading here and there. So just something to think about. It's been Hank. Hope you guys have a great day. That's it.